Ciao and welcome back to my channel. Last week I was working on some kind of experiments during the evenings. I made a small animation about metaballs emitted from a single emitter, and a lot of people asked me how I created that. It's quite a simple effect if you know how to create it. So I decided to make a tutorial. I hope that you will enjoy it. Let's dive in. We start removing all the elements. So I press A and X to remove everything. And let me activate the screencast keys. Okay, so you should be able to see on the bottom right corner what I'm doing. And we start creating an emitter, so mesh cylinder, and we don't really need this cylinder to have a lot of faces. I guess that with 20 we are fine. 20, and we don't really need it to be too big. It doesn't really change too much for us because we are going to change the size of the particles. We then remove the top and bottom faces, and we scale it a little bit down in edit mode. So scale Z to make the emitter a little bit smaller. We can change it later just in case. We go back to object mode and we change the name to emitter. And in this one we also call emitter. So this will be our emitter, and we can start applying a particle system. We don't really need to rename it because it's gonna be just this one. So if we start and we press play, we see that the particles fall down, and we don't want that. So first thing first, we remove the gravity, and in this way, once we press play, the particles are emitted in this way. Then we decide how long will be the animation. In this case we can go, for example, in the scene panel. We start from frame 0 and we go 25 frames per second. So if we want the animation to be 6 frames long, 6 seconds long, or even more, let's do 8 seconds. We just need to say 25 times 8, and as you remember, we can do calculations inside of Blender directly. So the other thing that we need to do is make the life of the particles longer, because as you can see, after 50 frames each particle disappears. So we go to the particle settings. The number, we can reduce the number at the moment. We can say that there are 100 particles because we don't really need a lot of them. Each particle will be rendered as a metaball, so we will remove probably particles later. The start frame will be 0 and the end frame will be 200. Yeah, should be fine. So in this way the particles should not actually disappear, yeah, because the lifetime is 50 frames. So we start emitting at frame 0, we end emitting at frame 200, but the lifetime is 50 and needs to be 200, so the amount of frames even more. So if we take a look now, the particles survive a little bit longer. Okay. The other thing that we want to do now is starting to add the particle itself. So we create a new collection that we can call particle, and we can hide this collection for now. And in the new collection, we press Shift A and we add a metaball, can be a ball. Now we can set the resolution of the metaball in a different way for render and view. So for example, we can see that in view, if the resolution is the same as render, can be like this, and if we duplicate, they attach. It can be right like this. Actually, we can do in render 0.1, and we can test in view 0.1 as well. And this one, second G, yeah, it's quite nice as an effect. Then in the resolution of the metaball, we can do even 0.5, so we don't really waste too much of memory. And we remove this one because the metaball will be this one, and this one can be called part. Then we show the emitter again, and we select it. It is a little bit smaller than the metaball, and in the particle settings we can start to set some stuff. For example, the source needs to be the faces because we emit from the faces and we consider the normals as well. Distribution jittered, particle phase, those can remain as they are. Velocity we can change later. Physics, Newtonian, yeah, it's fine. It doesn't really change too much because at the moment we don't have gravity as well. So in the render panel we can select render as an object. So we need to set what object, and it's gonna be our part. So if we go back now, we see nothing, to be honest, because the scale is too small. So let's do 1, and the scale randomness can be 0.8. So at the moment they are quite a lot. So we need to make sure that first we have less particles, and second that the scale is a little bit smaller. So we can do 0.7. Here you definitely need to test. So in this moment, yeah, and they're actually really slow because the closer they are to the center, the more they become blobby. So we need to increase the velocity of the particles, and we need to go in velocity, and we can go like let's try 3 meters per second, and we go back and we try again. And as you can see now, they work a lot better. If you remember, we can also change the resolution of the particle. In here it's 0.5, we can go to 0.4 as before, and this should be a little bit better. The other thing that we need to do is check if the particles exist before they are born and after their death. After their death means after the lifetime of the particle was completed. So we need to go into extract, into the render tab, and check for unborn. This means that all the particles that are not born yet are still visible. So see that they are in the center, we will see this like a blobby shape that emits particles. The other thing that I would like to do is probably decreasing the size of the particles. So the scale can be 0.5 probably. Yes, and it should be fine. Now another thing that you notice is that the shape in the center is kind of like a blobby shape, is not like a round one. The reason is because the emitter is round, so all the particles are attached to the emitter. So in order to sort this out, you can enter in edit mode into the emitter. You can hide probably the particle and simply scale it down. Scaling it down, you will notice that all the particles now should be fine if we make them visible. As you can see now, we have a round shape. That's actually our main particle because it needs to be visible, and all the other particles that come out from it. I would also change a little bit the resolution of the particle, because it's a little bit low, so in this way we can see a little bit better what we are going to do. At this point, everything you have to do is basically test it. The other thing is I would make the main particle a little bit smaller, so I can actually enter in edit mode. You don't really need to enter in edit mode. You can hide the emitter. At this point you need to do like this and then hide, because the last particle remains, and then you can scale this down. Remember that when you scale something down, the dimension and the scale also is scaled down. So what you have to do is Ctrl A and apply the scale. So if we include this one again, you will see that the particles are a little bit smaller because they take the size of this one. All you have to do now is going into the emitter and make the particles a little bit bigger into their scale. So at the moment it's 50%. We can do like 1% of the particle. And the other thing is scaling down the emitter again, because we basically made everything smaller. So edit mode, can hide the particle, and we can actually scale without scaling on the z-axis, so it becomes more like a cylinder. And we can test. It's all about testing your scene. So now we have this kind of round shape in the center. The other thing that we can do is actually, as you can see, the more we emit particles, the more this shape becomes smaller, because with the metaball we are merging all the particles in the center in a big like blobby shape. We can also increase the scale random to can actually do 0.9. Let's see if it's too much. They're actually fast enough. The other thing that I would like to do is testing if the particle is detailed enough in the resolution, because the view resolution and the render resolution are different. So if we do like 0.05, it should be, of course it takes more memory, but the emission is a lot better. And the other thing that I would like to do is starting from a smaller scale, because as you can see, the particles that I emit are the same size as the main one. Of course the main one is bigger. So what I would like to do now is stopping the animation, going into the emitter tab, and in the particle ones, in the size, making the scale like smaller, like 0.5. Let's see what happens. They become a little bit smaller, and they should be kind of fine. Of course, when you do that, you need also to increase the resolution of your particles, but probably 0.5 is too little. You can do like 0.7, and 0.7 should be fine enough. I also would need to change the size. The small particles are too small, and as you can see, they may become a little bit tricky to work with. So the first thing, we need to increase again the resolution of the particle. We can go to 0.2. Let's see what happens. My computer starts slowing down a little bit, of course, and they are not so bad here. I kind of like also the small ones. And probably another thing that I would like to do is stopping the life of the particles a little bit earlier. So I arrive to a point where I have a smaller particle in the center, and and the other that move away from it. So I select the emitter, and in the particle settings I can say that I want to stop to end the emission at frame 160. So I will probably need to redo it. And yes, as you can see, we need to render everything probably. I kind of like also this like kind of blobbiness that comes out from the particle, that becomes also a little bit smaller depending on the material that's emitted. And here we have the end of our emission where no more particles are emitted from the main one. You can keep playing with the settings. You can add force fields, you can reverse these in such a way basically your main particle becomes bigger. You can decrease the main particle size over time. You can do a lot of stuff. It's all about your imagination, really. The other thing that I would like to check is if I am showing the emitter. So let me see. Yeah, I am showing the emitter. As you can see in render, we can see show emitter. I don't want to show the emitter at the end. I want the emitter to be invisible. Not that it changes too much because we have the particle visible anyway. But you can actually move the particle in the main one. It doesn't really change too much. Yeah, and you can also play a lot with it. There is one thing, is that most of the particles are emitted from... No, it's just a case they are emitted in a line. It doesn't really change too much. You can also change, for example, the seed of your particles. The other thing is, since that I have the particle here, I need to increase the resolution in render to 0.01 in render. We can go higher, and we can decrease in here to 0.05. They become slightly less detailed. As you can see, they are not as rounded as the other ones, but it's a lot faster. The other thing is, in the emitter you can still play with some features. For example, you can increase, you can change the seed, so the particles are emitted in a different way. You can change the velocity if you want to make them a little bit slower. You can also change the random, because at the moment they are jitter, but you can go random, for example. And in this way, basically, you increase the randomness of your particles. You need to play a little bit with these parameters, to be honest. Another thing that I would like to do is making the main particle smaller, but the other one bigger. So to do so, I need to go into the scale of our particles and increase it. So if we make them bigger, we can go to 3, and they become a lot slower. I just want to test something, because if we arrive here, technically we arrive at the end where the main particle becomes a lot smaller. So at 160, all the particles that are unborn should be gone, and you remain with the main particle that it's smaller, because basically all the other particles are a lot bigger than the main one. I can probably decrease for the particle. I can make in the resolution probably up to 1, the resolution in the view, and at the moment I am emitting a lot of particles, so I go back to the emitter and I reduce the amount of particles that I am emitting to probably 50. Let's see what happens. Of course I need to test it again. Yes, even less than 50, and I can increase the speed. Let's do 30. Let's see what happens with 30. Yeah, probably with 30 is a good amount. You can also play a little bit with distance, because as you can see, the more the metaballs are close to each other, the more they attach to each other. So you can do in two ways. You can decrease in the metaball the influence to 0.3, for example. So we go half. Yes, we go half the distance as before. That can be a good one. Or you can speed up the particles so they separate a little bit faster and reduce the amount of particles, of course. So I would probably reduce the amount of particles to 25. Let's see what happens. Yes, it seems a good idea. Yeah, basically that's more or less everything for this effect. All you have to do now is still play a little bit. I cannot really play too much on a tutorial. I want to keep it a little bit shorter, but you can still play with the parameters of your metaball. And what you have to do now is simply color your particles. So you can open the shader editor, and you can apply a material to your your particle. So we can create a new material, and we can call like meta part mat. You can go into like material view. I keep this open because you can see what I'm pressing, and I close this one. Then you can start changing the color. In the example I put like kind of a black color. You can, I mean, this roughness is quite nice, to be honest. You can anyway reduce the roughness to 0.3. So what you get is this, and you can also set a background material. So I explained this in previous tutorials, and I can put the links in here. So I will speed up this part probably. Another thing that you can do is adding more lights to your scene. An area light is always a good solution. So you simply place the planes with this line pointing to your object. And what I suggest is rotating from the center, because you need to lit the center of your scene. So you can go to the end of the scene. Probably you can render them because they don't go really fast, so it doesn't really change too much for you where you go, but you can make it a lot bigger, and you can rotate from the 3D cursor. So if you press R, in this case X, it rotates like this, and then from the top you can rotate again in this way. Shift D, R, Z, and then Shift D, R, Z. So you have three light, 3 points light sources. The other thing is you can move them in a way that the main light is bigger, the secondary light is a little bit smaller, and the tertiary light, that's the backlight, and can be a little bit lower, so RXX. As you can see, the lights that are applied are really nice because they change the color of your object as well. You can also play a little bit with the material of the particle, of course. All you have to do now is playing a little bit with your cameras, the colors of the background, and probably add some camera animations around your object. And that's it. I hope you found this tutorial useful for your projects. Remember to subscribe to the channel to help me grow it and reach more people. And if you have any special requests on future tutorials, please write me, because I'm always looking for new subjects to touch. For now it's everything, and I'm waiting for you next week on another amazing tutorial. Ciao!